Hi, David.
Hi, Karat.
One of my favorite questions that we'd like to share with our viewers, or perhaps tell them a bit more about it. What is risk appetite, and why would you say it matters?
It does matter. Risk appetite is a subject that's been discussed quite a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. And unfortunately, in the industry, in the world of both risk management and in the wider world of business, there's a lot of confusion about what it means. And I think a lot of unclear, unhelpful thinking. So obviously appetite is a word, and risk appetite is a development of the idea of appetite. So let me ask you the question, we're halfway between breakfast time and lunchtime. How hungry are you?
I have an appetite for a good plate of, say, brunch.
Already? Okay, so you're quite hungry. How do we describe hunger? Hunger is a drive inside here. It's intangible. You kind of feel it. But if you said, a plate of brunch, that isn't actually your hunger. That's an amount of food. And so if we say, what is my appetite? How hungry are you? We don't have any units. I'm very hungry or I'm not very hungry.
But I'm hungry.
Hungry, yes, exactly. So it's an intangible, immeasurable.
True. Yes.
We could say on a scale of 1 to 10, my appetite is an 8 or a 7.
Correct.
We could say it's high, medium or low.
Yes.
But in terms of expressing it in a way that's useful, that's not very useful.
Yeah.
So what you did was you translated this internal feeling of there's something in my stomach and there's nothing in my stomach into an amount of food. So you said a nice plate of brunch. I might say I fancy a coffee and a pastry. Dr. Salim might say I really want a steak and chips. And what we're doing is we're using an amount of food as a proxy, as a measure of an internal drive that we can't see. You can't see hunger.
Yeah.
Now, the same is true with risk appetite. What we're asking is how hungry are you to take risk? What is your appetite for taking risk? How much, how much are you driven to take risk? And clearly that is going to influence the decisions that we make about our projects, about our investments, about our strategy, about anything that's important, the amount of risk that we take.
Yeah.
So decision makers need to be aware of their appetite for risk. Yeah. But when you say to them, what is your appetite? We have no units. It's high, I feel that I want to, I feel that I don't want to. And so what we do is, like for food, you substitute an amount of food for this feeling of hunger. I could eat a horse, I just want a salad, And so we do the same with risk. We translate risk appetite into an amount of risk. The amount of risk is not the appetite. The plate of brunch is not your hunger. It's an expression of your hunger that we can see and measure. My coffee and pastry is not an amount of hunger, it's an amount of food. And so the amount of risk that we take is not the risk appetite, it's an expression of risk appetite. And so we need to understand that there's something different about the external measurable thing and the internal drive that it comes from. The amount of risk I'm prepared to take, we call that our risk threshold. And so we have an upper and a lower boundary. So you would say, if my nice plate of brunch had a salad and some bread and some mezze, and so that's enough. If it had a steak on the side, that's too much. If it only has a few lettuce leaves and one piece of bread, that's not enough.
I'm not hungry anymore.
Okay, but you have a feeling for the kind of boundaries of the amount of food that is suitable. For me, 1 cup of coffee and 1 pastry, that's probably okay. 2 cups of coffee and 2 pastries is better.
I'm hungry now.
Yes, and so we have this discussion about what the amount is that reflects the hunger.
Yeah. Yes.
So now risk appetite is then our drive to take risk in a given situation, which is intangible and internal, but we express it through risk thresholds, which are measurable, which we can then use to actually see, to help us to make decisions about how much risk to take in a given situation.
Very nice. And could you also tell us how do you, of course, in brief, I'm pretty sure it's it's something that you can do. How do you set risk appetite?
Well, you don't set risk appetite. You can't set your level of hunger, can you? You can't say, I'm going to make myself more hungry or less hungry. You are as hungry as you are. What you do is you set the risk thresholds that express that hunger. So if you said, actually, I'm really, really hungry. I know it's only 10 o'clock in the morning, but I fancy 2 steaks and a big pile of rice and a nice pile of chips. Actually, that's not very helpful. That's not really good for you. It won't be good for your figure. It won't be good for your level of energy for the rest of the day. You know, it's a bad choice. So actually, you might find a level of risk threshold comes out of your initial appetite, which is inappropriate. And then we need to modify it. We need to set an appropriate risk threshold. And the same is true with the business. So you might have a chief executive or a management board who says, do you know what, we really need to take a lot of risk in this situation. Otherwise, we're not going to survive. We've got to become more competitive and launch a whole range of new products. And we need to do it by the end of the year. And then when you look at it, you think, that is crazy. We can't do that. That is way too much risk for us to take as a small organization or as limited resources. So we need to moderate that choice. I know you feel that's what you're driven to do, but it's not appropriate. Now we're back to the question of emotional intelligence and that 6 A's model that we talked about. And you moderate your chosen risk attitude to choose something different. So you can't set your risk appetite. It is what it is. It results in an initial preference. And if that's not appropriate, then you can change that. And you can set your thresholds, but you don't set the initial appetite.
Thank you, David.
It's a pleasure.